So yeah, I guess I had to shut it down and restart.
All right.
Okay, so I want to call. Okay.
We're not quite ready. We're going live. I was waiting for you to get on before I did the live.
Okay.
Now we're ready.
Okay, great. So yes, I guess the opening item is discussion protocol for virtual meetings. Who wants to handle that for us?
This is as in a sergeant at arms,
Pardon?
like a sergeant at arms.
Well, it's agenda item 1. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my old notes. Sorry. Believe it or not, I actually reviewed my notes from the previous meeting when I was reviewing the minutes. Sorry about that. Let me get to today.
That item is still on there, but mainly it is strictly for information purposes.
Okay.
So calling to order is the first item.
Yeah, and so I would like to, I'm sorry, but I would like to know how to get, okay. Okay, here we go. Okay. So let's go with the roll call. I'm the chair, Stanley Green. Gary Peterson.
He is absent.
Okay. Mike Denny.
Here.
Terrell Gottschall.
Present.
Edward Kantz.
He is absent as well.
Okay. So with regard to the consent agenda, I'm asking to have approval of minutes separated out. And we'll start by, other than that, approving the agenda for today.
Is there a reason that you want to separate them?
Right, I want to recommend a correction for the minutes.
Okay.
And so the minutes come after approve the agenda. So does anyone want to make a motion to approve the agenda presented for August 20?
I move we approve the agenda.
I second.
Okay, great. Any discussion of agenda approval? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes, there's just a small correction I want to add under item 3.02. The verb past should precede 5/0.
It does. You mean this part right here?
Under item 3.02, the second item.
Yes.
So yeah, it should be the motion passed 5-0.
Look under item 2. It says the motion 5-0.
Oh. See, I was looking at 3.02. 3.01, number 2. Got you. I will make that correction.
Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have any corrections for the minutes? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I see my name misspelled.
Okay.
This is still in 3.012. Motion was made by Commissioner Gottschall. This is just above the bottom of the page. Not that I mind. Yeah, there you go. 2 T's and a C.
Thank you. Any other corrections? Okay, hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the corrected minutes are approved. Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No, no one made arrangements.
Okay. And so the next agenda item is the 75th anniversary book. Who
Are we
wants to
doing one?
who wants to take the lead on this item?
Well, I can certainly fill you in on where we are with it. And I'm sure John has some stuff, but I've been writing furiously for 2 weeks. And been visiting and collecting a lot of information on College Place. And am about to start sending out different portions of what I've been working on to Gary and Terry to take a look at and proof and look them over. I've come across some amazing stories about College Place. And I actually asked John for an extension on reaching the timeline for the rough draft, which we extended 3 weeks because I have come up with so much more information I've got to get down. So lots of interesting things. I've been looking at the Chinese immigrants that came here, the Italian immigrants that came here, and their impacts and how they helped build this community. I've been looking at how College Place was platted and who were the first landowners where College Place was to rise. And it's been a very interesting journey, I will tell you. I have visited with a lot of people by phone. I've had phone calls from people all over Western North America who still get the Walla Walla Union Bulletin and found out this book was in the process. And so they've been calling and contributing, which has been fun. The other thing that's been interesting is that I have been able to get a hold of quite a few photographs of pioneers in this area. The one thing I do want to do, and that is get some additional photographs of the tribal members that lived here, the Cayuse and the Walla Walla. I found out that the Umatilla had very little to do with this land because this was Cayuse Walla Walla land and not Umatilla land. So that was interesting. I did not know that. And the other interesting thing is that the Cayuse spoke their own language. They did not speak Sahaptin, which the Walla Walla and the Umatilla spoke. So they had their own language, and it's now an extinct language. There's 300 written words. No one knows how to speak it, and it's considered an extinct language. Sahaptin, tribal language, is now considered extremely endangered because there's only 120 people that speak it worldwide. So what was once the language of the area is almost gone. So that's an interesting thing to me because communication is really important. So I just find that very interesting. Some other things that I've discovered is that the name College Place was suggested by Mr. Cardahan, who was College Place's first postmaster. And he suggested it clear back in 1891 and long before the College Place was ever brought into as a city. And so it stuck. And so Mr. Carnahan referred to this area as College Place. And all the Italian farmers that lived here and the Chinese referred to it as College Place because of the new college that was being built. So I've been able to get some amazing photographs. I have one of the first building in College Place was the administration building. And it just stands out there in this open field. There's no trees, there's nothing out there. It's just this open field with this huge building in it and 25 homes around it. So the school is what developed College Place, and people that came to teach or go to school here is who first showed up before or after the Chinese and the Italian farmers showed up. So it's been an interesting learning lesson. I've really enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
What do you see as the next step in terms of who you might be reaching out to or getting information from sources?
So as I get, right now, I'm still in the late 19th century, early 20th century. So I haven't even gotten to 1925 yet. I've just reached 1920. And so as I push further and further down those dates, I've been taking notes from people. I spent an hour and a half with Walt Meskey today, visiting with him about his experience here. He arrived here in 1947, the same year that the college, that city of College Place was incorporated. He was telling me where everything was, and that College Place was a very different place than it is now, and that the college church sits on the old college farm, and he worked very hard there. And he has put me in contact with Mayor Bunch, who was the very first mayor of College Place, with his son. So I'm going to be talking with him. And so I'm going for, I want to visit with as many offspring and descendants of the mayors of College Place as I can, and often with the mayors that are here. I have a meeting next Wednesday with Dennis Lapiani, who was the longest running police chief in College Place, and actually the longest serving police chief in the state of Washington. So I have a visit with him. I'm looking for information on the first firefighters in College Place. I would love to find out if any of their descendants are still here. Shorty Rudolph was the college fire chief when I arrived here in 1970 as a sixth grader. So, and then when I came to college in 1978, he was still here. So that was pretty amazing. But Fred Bennett was also very involved in the fire department. So I'm going to be visiting with George Bennett about what happened there. So I've got a lot of different people to still visit with. I'll tell you, I discovered and learned that it's going to take more time to get this written up because there is so much additional material than I assumed there was at the beginning. And so 1 month to do the write-up for the rough draft was simply not enough time. So, so that's where we are.
Great. Yeah, sounds like a lot of work. I'd like to suggest a name, and if you're interested, I can help you get in touch. Paul Dasenko was the first teenager elected to the College Place City Council the same year that the first woman, Helen Cross, was elected.
Okay.
He has interesting stories about his experience as a teen on the city council and of his interactions with Helen Cross as the first woman on the council.
Yes. I used to attend city council meetings in 1978, and Helen was there, and she and Austin Morgan would get in huge discussions with Bernie Yonke. And sometimes they got rather heated. And that was interesting. But Helen had her thoughts, and Austin Morgan had his thoughts, and they seldom met. So that was pretty interesting. But I would love to talk to Dasenko. I would
Okay,
appreciate
I'll get
that.
in touch with him and ask him to get in touch with you.
Please
Is it
do.
okay if I give him your phone number and email address?
You bet.
Okay, so one thing that comes to mind with regard to this is that back in the 1970s, maybe other periods too, there were mimeograph flyer wars. I don't know if anybody here remembers though, but I wonder whether any of those have been archived. So somebody who, either, you know, a council member or candidate for council member, or somebody who had a grudge against a council member or was supporting a council member would mimeograph little broadsides and distribute them all over town with whatever issue they were concerned about.
Ah,
For those who don't know, mimeograph was kind of an early version of what's
oh,
later done with photocopying.
right. Run them off, ink it and run it off.
Yeah.
Spirit Masters. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But if any of those are, have you checked with the Peterson Memorial Archives?
Yes, Brooke Davies has,
Okay.
what happened was when the city of College Place moved from the old city hall to the new city hall,
Uh-huh.
tons, literally tons of old records and mimeographed everything was dumped.
No.
Wow.
Yes. And a lot of historical information went to the dump, and it
Wow.
makes me sick. And it
Yeah.
was some choices made by the mayors at the time,
Uh-huh.
who just decided it was garbage and needed to go. And that was a real waste.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was sick when I found that out.
I vividly recall the mudslinging campaigns carried out with mimeograph flyers.
Yep.
Those were fun times.
So I have just a short story. I've already told John and Lisa about that, but there was a College Place police officer, only he called himself the marshal, and his name was Mr. Cameron, Marshall Cameron. And he had an old pickup that he used as a law enforcement vehicle with a big red light, like we have spotlights on the outside of vehicles. He had a big red light. And when you got red lighted, that meant pull over because Cameron wanted to give you a ticket. So he always parked in the same spot along College Avenue, and everyone knew where he was going to be. So one night, 2 college students stole a big rope from the college farm, crawled under Cameron's pickup with him in it, tied it around the back axle, and then tied it to a telephone pole on College Avenue. And the rope was 75 feet long, so he could build up some speed and get going. Then they snuck out from under his pickup, ran and got in their vehicle, and went ripping down College Avenue in front of him as fast as they could go, knowing he would take after them. And when he did, he ripped the entire back end of his pickup out and dropped the back bumper onto the street. And he could not chase him. And for years, they didn't have any idea who had done that to Cameron. So he mimeographed signs and put them up all over town about the severe vandalism to his police car, to the pickup. But he would never say that it was he that drove off down the road and jerked the back end out of the pickup. So anyway, come to find out, Walt found out who it was years later, and it was his college roommate that had partaken in this. So anyway, that was one of the stories about mimeograph flyers all over town. Walt said they just filled every doorway, every window. They were in every building about information leading to the arrest and prosecution of these 2 guys. But it never happened. No one ever found out who did it.
Wow, that's quite a college prank story.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Anyway.
you. Yeah, it's a great project. Thanks, Mike. Any more comments or questions about the book?
Mike, have you come across Dorsey Nichols? His father owned the William and Sons General Store, College Ave and 3rd, at the turn of the century.
I have seen his name, but I do not have much information on him.
There is a state Supreme Court case about his son, Dorsey Nichols, who kept the store open on Sunday in 1901 in violation of blue laws.
Okay.
And he got busted by the local county sheriff. He and 3 saloon owners and John Sharpstein, manager of the baseball team.
Right?
And the three saloon owners were fined for violating blue laws. John Sharpstein was freed because the judge decided that baseball did not violate Sunday laws. But the Dorsey Nichols case went up to the Supreme Court in terms of religious liberty.
Wow.
In a 1902 decision. But I came across it while, of course, studying baseball.
My.
And I'll get into my files and pass on the stuff to you.
That would be outstanding.
Yeah, there are a couple of really good pictures of the store in the college archives. Brooke could put you on to them.
Okay.
It
I'll ask about it.
It then became the old bookstore from our time, Stanley,
Right.
the 60s and 70s.
Right.
And now, of course, that parking lot.
Okay.
But there are some really good pictures of that in the archives.
Well,
Yeah,
I
that
will
was a-
get a hold of Brooke and ask her for those.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
that-
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
that,
another thing I found out, just a little sidebar, and that is that two very different groups of Italians came here as immigrants. The ones from Milan, the Milanese is what they called themselves. They were from northern Italy. And then the Cabrisi, who came from Naples, and they could not get along. And that's why there is the Catholic Church out in the far east end of Walla Walla, and St. Francis Church. The St. Francis is a Cabrisi church, and Milanese is the one in East Walla Walla. And they had to build it because they were going to church, and invariably every mass there'd be a fist fight. So they have to break them up. And finally, they just built separate churches for each of these two different groups of Italians. So
Oh,
When I-
fun stuff.
that was just bizarre, but part of our history. Yeah.
great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more comments or questions about the anniversary book? All right, well, thanks again, Mike. It's an exciting project. We really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And if you can think of anybody else or any other events in what is to become College Place or became College Place, please let me know.
Right, absolutely. Okay, do we have any reports today?
Yes, actually, we got some good news today from DAP that we have been awarded a grant to do the GPR of the Poor Farm Cemetery.
All
Great.
right.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. So we'll start reaching out to contractors that might be interested in doing the work, and that'll be part of next year's project for next year. But yeah, so that's exciting.
Outstanding. Thank you
Well, I
for writing
understand,
that
sir.
grant.
Yeah,
It's outstanding.
That's great.
Stanley, did you have a question about it?
Do I understand correctly that the cemetery is owned by the city?
Yes.
Okay, and who does the current maintenance?
Country Estates is still handling that.
Okay, okay. Does it have the status of a city park such as Mountain View Cemetery is within the city of Walla Walla?
I don't believe it's listed in our Parks and Rec plan as a park.
Uh-huh, okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that because Mountain View Cemetery is officially a Walla Walla City Park. So, okay. Yeah, I think that's a great project. There's a parallel to the cemetery at Northern State Hospital near Cedral Woolley. I've been there, and the graves were actually marked very similarly. Those that were marked, some of them just had numbers. But there's been an effort there to get better identification of who is interred where at that site also.
Hmm.
That was a former large mental hospital that closed in the early 1970s. So great. Okay, well, that's going to be a great project. Okay.
One comment, Stanley. In my digging around for information, I also remember talking to George Bennett about this when before the development of Tom Watson's land down on where Walmart is, there was an old rail bed that ran parallel to Scenic View down through College Place. It was part of the old rail trolley thing. And right beside it, when they were excavating to put those homes in that Clyde Peterson put in that little addition, they found a Chinese burial there, which
Wow.
is to the west of where the Poor Farm was.
Right.
And how they know it was Chinese, there were Chinese ceramic bowl, several Chinese artifacts that were in that grave. And I don't know what happened to any of those artifacts. And I would love to chase down where those went. But they were excavated by a contractor. I'm going to ask Gary who was doing that contracting and that excavation there.
Was that the Sherburne subdivision?
Yes. Yep. But
That's
so that's
interesting.
almost directly west of the Poor Farm there.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just wondering if there aren't more Chinese burials in that area because that was Chinese farmed land out there.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Nobody called the sheriff? or the
I don't
police
know what
department?
they did with it. I have no idea. I just know George was telling me that the excavator was showing everyone a bowl and some kind of container, terracotta container that had Chinese figures on it. He pulled it out of the ground. And I said, well, what about the bones, the person? Well, no one mentioned the bones. So I really don't know what happened there. And that was in the early 70s that this was just, I guess, early 80s that this was discovered.
Yeah, the protocols that would trigger these days would be a lot more than what you're describing.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know where those artifacts went. And I would love to try and chase those down.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I'll be interested in hearing. So the rail line you're describing is the Walla Walla Valley Railway freight spur that went along to Marson.
Correct. It was called the Walla Walla Traction Company.
And then later the Walla Walla Valley Railway.
Correct.
And so they operated the interurban from Walla Walla to Milton with hourly service from roughly 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. So
right.
In those days, College Place had more frequent transit service to Milton Freewater than it has now.
Correct.
And it operated, but the line through the area you're describing and out to Marson, that particular branch, as far as I know, never had scheduled passenger service. It was for freight. It went out to the Baker Langdon packing house and had an intertie with the Union Pacific out there.
Correct. And there was also a series of warehouses west of College Place where they picked up produce.
Right. So, but the main line had a station in the approximate vicinity of the, there was a station on 4th, so the line ran, so there was a passenger station there on 4th Street. I've seen a photo of it.
Well, I have a photo of the engine that ran back and forth from Milton on that line.
From what vintage?
1902.
You need to contact Mark Ency, Walla Walla University grad, who wrote his master's degree up at Eastern Washington on Walla Walla Valley transportation in the early 19th and early 20th centuries. He's now teaches, or I call he's over at Lewiston at the community college there. I can get you his. He's Brooke Davis's cousin.
Okay. Well,
He
I'll
has-
ask Brooke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's
And-
got lots of stuff. And that was the interurban that ran down to the water park there on the river.
Right.
What was it called? Became Tumulum Park eventually, but it was, can't recall the name of the landowner there.
It might have been
Mike-
Amador. I'm not sure.
I should know this. They played baseball there in 1908. Meter Park.
Yeah, MEADOR.
Mike, I apologize for a teaching your grandmother to suck eggs question, but have you used the Sanborn fire maps from that period?
I've looked at two of them.
Okay.
Yeah. But I have this massive book and it's all of Walla Walla County and every town in the county from 1909. And it
Ah,
shows everything. It's all the plats, all the
plats.
everything. And Doug Saturno loaned that to me.
uh-huh.
So I've been pouring through that as well.
Fun stuff.
The
It is really fun.
Fort Walla Walla Museum Archaeology Services produced a report that I think you could request from them. I'm not very happy that it hasn't been more widely distributed, but I think if you request it from them. So during a project, I think it was on Whitman Street in Walla Walla, they were tearing out streetcar tracks, and which were considered an historical resource. So the state required as a mitigation that they commission a report on the Walla Walla Valley Railway.
Mm. Okay.
And
I'll ask James.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so, but yes, it provided important transportation services to College Place. As you probably know, it was electric until 1947. And then it was dieselized until it stopped operating in the 1980s.
Okay. Well, I'll ask James for it.
Okay, they may have used a small steam locomotive during construction, but from roughly the time it opened until 1947, it operated with electric trolley cars and electric trolley locomotives.
Okay. So
Great.
one other quick thing, I found parts of Baker Boyer's narrow gauge rail line
Oh my.
that had been ripped out and it's being used as a cattle guard.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
But that's the rail line that runs that Rose Street parallels.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's an important part of the transportation history of College Place because it's basically the earliest non-portage railroad in what is now Washington State.
Right. It was the very first rail line in Southeast Washington.
Right.
it would be the wooden rails, the wooden tracks.
That's
Well,
how it
there were
started.
wooden tracks around Walla Walla College Place, and then he had little narrow gauge steel tracks out at Wallula. And that's because of the heavy loads that he was bringing. And as they came into the valley, they were unloaded down around Tushy, Loudon, all through the valley. And they were somewhat lighter when they reached Walla Walla.
Mm,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
Great. Okay, any more discussion? Any further reports?
Nope.
Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled for September 17. Are there any closing items? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Then I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
I'll see
Bye.
you tomorrow morning, John.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Mike. Send me that stuff when you can.
I'll send it to you this evening.
Okay.